Hey, Marvel's pretty popular, right? It's not really a secret to say that Marvel's trying really hard to create a video game empire the same way they tackled movies with the Spiderman game, the Avengers game, the Guardians game, the upcoming Wolverine and Midnight Suns. All of these, whether they end up good or bad, are made by established, well-recognized studios, and so we can assume that this isn't gonna stop anytime soon. Because of that, I wanted to do something slightly different today. Usually what you get out of me is some kind of input on something that already exists, like a trailer or a game that I really like, or a general discussion topic about the gaming industry. Typically, you're getting some kind of analysis or breakdown of some sorts, but today we're going to be doing pitching ideas. We're going to do yeah, I couldn't think of a way to finish that sentence even, so I have a feeling this whole pitching idea thing is gonna go badly. In this video, I want to pitch 15 Marvel game ideas and which studios exactly should make them, and keep in mind, some of these are gonna be pretty unlikely. Some of these studios are small, and I doubt that Marvel would approach them or listen to a pitch from them, but you know, anything's possible. I tried my best to steer clear from exclusive studios, but a few will poke their heads here and there, but I'm pretty sure I've evened out the amount of Xbox and PlayStation exclusives. Also, obviously, while I would love to see a NetherRealm X-Men fighting game or a Daredevil game by Rocksteady or something by Avalanche Studios, they're all under WB Games, and that means that they're DC, so there's no way that they're gonna get a Marvel game. I tried to make sure that all of these studios had at least a sliver of chance of actually making a game like this. However unlikely that might be, there is always some possibility. I think to kick it off, we have to start with something that came straight from the horse's mouth in terms of actual interest for making a game like this, and that's The Punisher by Naughty Dog. I can already envision some people being annoyed at that because of the Last of Us 2 fiasco, but let's try and leave that at the door for a sec, because obviously this video is not about that. Neil Druckmann, which is the only name he's known by the way, there's no other nicknames or anything. Neil Druckmann, I promise that's what everyone calls him. He responded to a tweet by Greg Miller which asked if he could pick any established IP to make a game on, not just Marvel, any established IP, what would it be? And his first pick was Punisher, and Ghost Rider wasn't far behind. A Punisher game would definitely either be a first or third person shooter, so Naughty Dog is pretty experienced in that department now, which would make it a good match gameplay wise. And obviously the incredibly dark tone that most Punisher stories come with matches their past work as well, specifically The Last of Us. Not to mention, Punisher Season 2, even though I wasn't a huge fan of that season, is very Last of Us in nature. It's got some of that same dynamic at its center, although the kid's infinitely more annoying in that show, and also didn't look young enough for me to blame her being an absolute tool on being young, but regardless, although people would definitely immediately start talking about how Naughty Dog is gonna butcher the IP with their woke agenda, or they're gonna perform a bunch of character assassinations, I think this is a good fit personally, and they want to do it, so that's a big bonus. Next up is an Iron Man game by Respawn. If you were one of the people who actually played Avengers, you probably know that Iron Man was the character that felt the most complete, powerful, and fun to play out of the bunch. And there's clearly a potential here for a good Iron Man game if made by a studio that's shown they have some versatility and can pair good gameplay with a good story, and I think Respawn is perfect for that job. They've already shown that they're one of the hardest working groups in the industry. They've made really satisfying shooters in the past with some great movement. Play Titanfall 2 and tell me there are not seeds for hover flight, robot suit battles, and cool traversal for an Iron Man game, and they've shown that they can also do melee well. Plus, I think an Iron Man game would incorporate some light Metroidvania elements into its exploration just like Jedi Fallen Order did. Tony would upgrade his suit as the game goes along and it lets you access new places, so that's another thing they have going for him. I had to think really long and hard about Iron Man, but I honestly think that Respawn is the best choice here. They would absolutely kill it. Moon Knight by Ninja Theory. Ninja Theory is a bit of a weird developer because they'll come out with a crazy action game like DMC Devil May Cry, which plays and looks amazing, but fans hated it because it changed the style of the old DMC games. Then they'll come with a game as revered as Hellblade, and then they'll do Bleeding Edge, and then go back to Hellblade again. I actually initially pinned Ninja Theory down to do a Hitmonkey game or something because of DMC, and because it looks like they don't want every game of theirs to be as tragic and harrowing as something like Hellblade. So something like Hitmonkey would be a nice melee-ish action palette cleanser like they've had in the past. But I think with Moon Knight about to get a show, and the fact that no AAA studio has tackled mental health, specifically psychosis, like Ninja Theory has, plus the fact that they've shown that they can also flip on a dime and make a high-paced action title, they'd probably be a perfect fit for a Moon Knight adaptation from both a psychological perspective and an action perspective. Fantastic Four by Skydance New Media. If you haven't heard of Skydance New Media, that's probably because they haven't actually made a game before. So why the hell are they here, you ask? Well, it is a new studio, but the names inside of that studio are anything but new, specifically one name, Amy Hennig, who most notably was a creative director and writer at Naughty Dog, her most famous work of course being the original 3 Uncharted games. It was announced last month that Skydance New Media, her new game studio, was partnering with Marvel for a story-driven single-player experience. So I'd be remiss if I didn't take at least a stab at maybe not what I think the game is, but what I hope the game is, and obviously as you can tell, I picked Fantastic Four. This is a group of characters that's fallen out of favor in the mainstream because of the massive mounds of movies that have been made on the Four in the past few decades, but I love Fantastic Four, and I want nothing more than for them to regain their former glory. I think the most essential things with the Fantastic Four are to A, have them be clever with their powers and find creative solutions to unsolvable problems, and B, give them a fun, believable family dynamic. They're marketed as Marvel's first family. They need to have the sternness, the banter, the competitive drive, the teasing, all of that. They need genuine relationships with one another, and I think Amy Hennig as a writer is very clever, witty, and writes fantastic character interactions. She's the writer I would want on a Fantastic Four game, so if they're gonna do a Marvel title, fingers crossed it's that one. It probably won't be, but let me dream, okay? A few of these have taken a little longer to explain than I wanted to, so I'm gonna rattle off a few that are a little less wordy. THQ Nordic, Ghost Rider. I think the aesthetic, art style, and dark mythology feel of the Darksiders games could translate pretty well to Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider in live action looks dumb and probably always will, so having a slight cartoony style while also not looking childish, and of course being made by a team that's experienced with AAA hack and slashers, would be the winningest formula you could get out of a Ghost Rider game, at least in my eyes. Blade by Capcom. Think Devil May Cry with vampires and you basically have a Blade game. This feels like the most straightforward one to me. I think this would be cool as heck, and I don't really have much more to say about it. Cable by Machine Games. To be honest with you guys, I'm not as familiar with Cable as I'd like to be. I have a surface level knowledge on his character. I know he's got telekinesis, but it varies in effectiveness depending on what story you're talking about. He gets like augments to recreate the power through technology, I'm pretty sure. I don't know, but I do know that he's a tough dude who makes things go boom, and damn it if it doesn't feel like the Wolfenstein devs have set themselves up to be ripe for that job. In the middle of me pitching Marvel games, I thought it might also be good for me to pitch, me to you. Sorry, that didn't make any sense. We're getting closer to 1,000 subs. Will we hit it by the end of the year? I don't know, maybe? It's very up in the air right now, but if you do enjoy this, I guess, check out the channel and see if there's anything that you would enjoy over there. Subscribe, and onto the rest of the video. Okay, now this is one of my favorites personally, a Hawkeye / Ronin game by One More Level. This is one of the ones that I meant when I said the studio is pretty small, so there's almost no chance this happens, but let me just live in my fantasy world. Ghost Runner is a game that deserves to be talked about way more. It's incredible and smooth to play, and I think for a solo Hawkeye game, you gotta focus on parkour and movement and quick action. A standard bow and arrow game where you shoot from the shadows really won't cut it in my opinion, and a generic third or first person shooter formula with a bow as your main weapon doesn't sound great. Ghost Runner already feels like that one scene from Endgame where Clint is Ronin, and if you could create some more open environments and instead of having these powers on the D-pad, you instead incorporated some long-range bow and arrow stuff, I think you've created the only Hawkeye game that could ever be fun. Doctor Strange by Remedy Entertainment. Remedy has already done some superpower-ish stuff with games like Quantum Break and Control, and it's the latter one that really convinced me that they'd be able to make a great game about the good doctor. The striking and trippy visuals and weird imagery mixed with the bevy of superpowered abilities is exactly what you'd look for. I think especially with the movie being so trippy and Inception-like visually, mirror dimensions and folding buildings and all that, you'd need to have that kind of stuff in a game about Doctor Strange, and not many developers can pull that off. Remedy was able to do that while giving us a cool third-person action experience, and if you swapped out the guns for spells, I think you've got a really good foundation for a cerebral experience fit for Doctor Strange. Iron Fist by Sloclap. Another small studio, but if you want to do a martial arts game, this is exactly where you gotta look at, I think, especially with the Sleeping Dog devs being defunct now. I would've said Shang-Chi, but he's a bigger name than Iron Fist. I think Iron Fist makes more sense for a smaller title. Plus with this character, I think you could keep the martial arts pretty standard and add a few special moves around his powers, so it'd be a bit easier to pull off. Sloclap is the studio behind Absolver, a great fighting game that showed a lot of promise from them, but more importantly, they're working on Sifu, and if you've seen any clips of Sifu before, which if you haven't, I guess you are now, you know exactly why I'm making this choice. The fighting is so fast and energetic and true to real life, and while a different studio with a bigger name might be what Marvel eyes for an Iron Fist project if they ever do it, I really doubt that whatever studio is picked would make a better game than the one made by Sloclap. Deadpool courtesy of Platinum Games. I mentioned a game a couple of videos ago called Comix Zone, a Sega Genesis and Game Boy Advance game that looks like, well, what you're seeing on screen. And when I think of a Deadpool game, an imaginary one, not the real one, I think of this. A game where you pop through comic panels as a side-scroller with fourth wall breaks all around. But the thing is, I also think of a high-octane 3D action game with crazy sword and gun combos. And I think of a game that keeps changing its style for short sections, like having an arcade shooter level or a random racing segment. Just general insanity and a bunch of ideas all in one game. And wouldn't you know it, a game like that already kind of exists, and one that's amazing and not obnoxious and actually makes all of its different gameplay styles work well together. Nier Automata. I think the classic Platinum Games formula would be great for Deadpool, but it's Automata's variety that really sells them to me as the only sensible choice for the job. Captain America by Sucker Punch. Realistically, Sucker Punch can do a lot of things. I think they could do Storm, of course, but also Magneto or something would be really cool, but I chose Captain America not based on what they did with Infamous, but what they did with Ghost of Tsushima. Infamous definitely proved that they could do superhero stuff, but I think it's more interesting to focus on Ghost's combat system, which is kind of like a mix of Neo and Arkham. I could 100% see a Captain America game where you were usually outnumbered in a fight, but you had a little more agency with your moves than you do in the Batman games. You could toss your shield around, all that fun stuff. With Infamous, of course, proving that Sucker Punch can tell an effective comic book story that's exceptionally stylized, I think a bizarre mix of these two games could actually make a great formula for a Captain America title. Alright, we're in the final three now, and the first one that I wanted to bring up is an X-Men game by Bioware. I think the character or group of characters that would make the most sense as an RPG are the X-Men, and Bioware, even though they've stunk it up a bit recently, is still one of the best at making an RPG with a real ensemble cast. I could just envision a Mass Effect style RPG with Scott Summers at the helm instead of Commander Shepard and all these interpersonal relationships. To me, X-Men is not as much about action as it is about diving into the characters and their interactions and how the world views them and how they view each other. So if you made like an Avengers style game with X-Men, even if it was well crafted and not a games as a service, I still think it'd fall flat. To me, if you're gonna make a big budget AAA X-Men game, it's gotta be an RPG. A Quicksilver game by Luminous Productions. So I knew I wanted Luminous as one of the studios in this video because A, they're part of Square Enix, making them pretty likely to be signed up for a Marvel project, and B, because their upcoming game Forspoken already looks like a superhero game and the powers look pretty interesting. The thing was though, I couldn't figure out what to give them because I'm not crazy familiar with their work. I will say though that the traversal from Forspoken is kind of reminiscent of Makari from the Eternals. The effects in that movie and this game kind of remind me of one another, but since Makari isn't super well known and I think having a game around one Eternal doesn't make a whole bunch of sense, I subbed in Quicksilver instead. A Quicksilver game would be difficult to pull off, but I think you might be able to pull a Spider-Man-like combat system which is pretty free-flowy and the attacks are a bit of a blur, but you can still air juggle and perform fun moves, and you can have a super speed ability where the world slows down immensely, and you can set up a bunch of finishing moves like that one Days of Future Past scene, and when the ability runs out, a bunch of people collapse at once. For traversal, I think you could tweak what you have here, and that could be really fun. I think you could make this like an origin story to justify him being a little bit slower and only sometimes being able to hit his full potential, and I'd say this is probably the toughest one to pull off, but Forspoken looks like it's showing signs of this being a possibility, so I think Luminous Productions has the best chance of making this happen. And last but not least, this might sound goofy to anyone who's not me, but I would love to see this happen, and that is an Arkane Doctor Doom game. I was racking my brain so hard trying to figure out what Arkane should do because they seem perfect for some type of superhero or supervillain game, and the more I think about it, the more I believe Doctor Doom is legitimately perfect. I think this could be like a reimagining of Doom's origins and his rise to power in Latveria, take some seeds from the comics but really create a new story about his journey to the top. Doom is a master of both magic and technology, which given Arkane's affinity for magic abilities in their games is great. But he's also an amazing schemer and one of the smartest people to ever live, so my pitch is, the game starts right after Doom's horrible accident that disfigures his face. This allows you to have a plot device where maybe Doom is struggling to remember the magic he's learned over the years due to the head injury, and slowly throughout the game he can start remembering it, which gives you access to new powers. I think the game should center around Doom's quest to rule Latveria by assassinating important figures through the ranks, which again plays to Arkane's strength of playing your way. Maybe you can put your focus on brute force weaponry, maybe you can take a stealthier approach, and in the end when you wind up ruling Latveria, depending on how you played, you're either feared by the citizens if you came across like a murdering lunatic, or you're respected for your ability to rise through the ranks if you played it smarter and more intuitive. Personally, I think that sounds amazing. I would really love that. It's never gonna happen, but that's okay. I'd love to know if you guys have your own Marvel pitches and which studio would be perfect for for them, leave those in the comments. I would really like to see those. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Leave a sub here if you're new. Like I said, close to 1,000 subscribers, so that's pretty cool. If you subscribe, that would be awesome. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.